will show you how to use the trucking invoice tracker that I built. So I sell this item on Etsy and also on my website. If you're interested, check it out. So if you purchase this item on my website, it'll be a little bit cheaper and you get 10% discount. So check out the link in the description. So first, let's go through all of the tabs that you get when you purchase this item, and then we'll go over an example. And then after that, I will show you an example of a template that's all filled out so you can see how the dashboard works and how it looks like when it's all filled out, okay? All right, so when you purchase this item, you'll get 2, 4, 6, 8 tabs. So the first tab, it's kind of like instructions, and then the second tab is setup tab. So here is where you can go in and set up your company information. So this information here will flow to the invoice, and then these are the drop-down menu in the in the customer database and also in the invoice payment tracker and details. So you can change any of this description to your preference and it'll be part of the drop down menu. One of the other item I want to point out is for this item here, I also put a note. Just please make sure to don't change these 3 statuses up here, paid, partially paid, and overdue, because this is part of the information that flowed to the dashboard. So if you change this, the dashboard is not going to be able to pick up this information. So please don't change these statuses. You can add as many status as you want below here, but please keep this as is, okay? Alright, so after you set it up and you're happy with how it looks, then you can move over to the customer database. So here I have already set up a few customers. So here you can set up as many customers as you have, right? So here it gives you the count for the total customers. So I have 22, so it gives me 22, which is correct. So we can add, the client information, the company, the main contact, phone number, email, and then here's a drop-down menu. So whatever you set up as a drop-down menu will be part of over here. And then you can put when you start working with the customer, the active date, and then you terminated. So when's the end date, and of course you can put the physical address, web address. Here you have any contract that you need to sign or you need to get any document from them. It's kind of noted here, and then you can put a link to where you save those files. Okay. And after you finish setting up the customer database, then you can set up the invoice tracker. So here is where you set up the invoice information. So here on this tab here, it gives you the invoice information, and then also the invoice amount, the tax applied, the grand total of the invoice, the total payment received, and then the outstanding balance and whether the amount is paid off or not. So this area here in orange, it will automatically populate as you fill out more data. But here's where you set up the invoice first. You set up the invoice information. So once you set up the invoice information, then you can go to the invoice detail. So this is where you input the invoice detail that will go into the invoice itself. So one thing I want to note is that you need to set up the invoice over here first, and then that invoice will automatically flow to the drop-down menu here, and then you can pick that invoice, and then you can start, adding description and whatnot for the invoice, okay? And then up here, you also have a lookup kind of drop-down to see any invoice that you want to see, and then you can see how much you charge for weight, mileage, waiting, cancellation, and other, and then it'll tell you the total invoice before tax. All right. And the invoice generator, this is the invoice template, and then you see a lot of NAs here. It's mainly because there's no data, and then the formula can't find the information, but that's okay. So this is how the invoice look like, and then this is the button where you click on it, and then it generates a PDF, and then you can preview the invoice, and then after that, you can send the email to your customer by clicking another button. All right. And then there's a payment tracker. So as you receive payment from your customer, you can come here and then pick from the drop down menu the invoice number. You can put in the payment date, and then the customer name will automatically populate, and then you have the you can log in the payment amount and then the payment method, and then you can put a note as well what that is for. And here of course is similar to the invoice detail, where you can search an invoice, click on invoice, and you can see what's the grand total for the invoice and what's the payment that you receive. Okay. And then lastly, this is the dashboard. Right now it's mostly blank because there's not much data that we've input. So that's why I'm going to show you an example later when everything's filled out so you can see how it looks. All right, but let's do an example. Okay, so first you need to start up with the setup tab. So here I'm happy with everything here. So I'm going to move forward to the customer database, and then so I'm happy with setting all my customer and I'm good. I have 22 customer. Then I will move on to the invoice tracker. So here's where I can start creating my invoices. So please remember that the invoice column here, like all your invoice number, it must be unique. And there's also a script in here that enforces that rule. So if you write something twice, there's going to be a script that'll pop up and says, hey, you can't do that. So for example, if I do INV 001, so that's one invoice setup, right? If I do it again, hopefully it pops up. All right, so you see it pops up right here and it says duplicate entry. It's not allowed on column B, so it's going to remove it. Okay, so that's how it works. So please ensure that there is no duplication of invoice, and it's very important because that's how the invoice find the information and populate that data. Okay, so I'll create an invoice, and then I'll say for that invoice date it'll be 5/25/2025. Let's say the due date will be in another month, so 2025. Client name, so here you can pick any of the client that you've already set up, so that's why it's important that you set it up in the customer database first. So from there it'll be part of the drop down menu, right? So I'll just do customer company as an example, and then recipient name I'll just do Jane Doe. Pickup location, I'll just do Seattle, Washington. Delivery location, let's do Portland, Oregon. Mileage proposed, so let's say it's 300 miles. Proposed mileage rate, so let's say it's $2.25 per mile. Proposed weight, if you do weight, like if you're transferring something based on weight and you're charging your customer on weight, then you can put it here. If not, you can leave it blank. But let me just do an example. So like proposed weight, you can say, it's just a description, right? You can do two tons or 3 tons or 2,000 pounds, whatever you want. Proposed rate, let's say, is 150 per ton. Okay, and then tax rate for this client, I'll just put 10%. And then the vehicle to transport this, the vehicle ID or registration, I'll just put REG 1001. Okay, and then here you can type it. You can put in the invoice type that you want. You're starting a draft, so I'll put draft. And then you can put a date sent or due date here as you complete. But this section here should automatically populate, so you don't need to input anything there. So you should only ideally enter data up to column U. Okay, so after you've set up that invoice, now you can go to the invoice detail. So here, after you set up that invoice, you can see it's part of the drop down menu. Then you can click on that invoice. Now you can put in the date. The date here is basically asking for this date here on this in this section here. So the date and the load details basically, right? So the date here, let's just say on 5/20/2025, right? What is the type? So you can see here on the invoice generator, there's different type. There's like mileage, wage, weight, waiting, cancellation, or other charges. So it's asking you what type is this for? Is it for mileage? So if it's mileage, you can just say load transit, right, from Seattle to Portland, right? And then you put actual mileage. Like earlier we said proposed 300, so say actual mileage 305, right? But there's no weight. We're not doing weight. Then you can skip the weight. Then the rate, what's the actual rate that you're charging? So let's say you're charging 220 as whatever we propose, so that's the amount. So I want to show you how it works, right? So we put this data there, and then we go to this invoice generator. You pick from the invoice number. So as you can see, it populates, right? It populates the data for that customer, and then who's the recipient, the pickup, the delivery location, registration, the proposed weight, proposed rate, proposed mileage, and then the rate, and then whatever we input in here, right here, it automatically pop up to here, right? Because we didn't put anything for weight, then it doesn't show for weight. So let me show you again. So then you can add more lines, right? You can do again. So you can do like maybe on 5/20/20 or 20/20/21, whatever, right? Let's say we're doing weight at this point, right? Just an example, right? So let's say like it's 2. So here you cannot put like tons or whatnot because this needs to be a value. So you can put this as a description, right? So you say 2 tons right there as your description, right? So you can put 2 tons here. Your rate is actually 150 per ton. Then you can see it automatically multiply this. So as you can see on the generator, you can see, right, it moves over right away. So let's see, we're doing same thing. Let's say we're doing invoice and then we're doing 5/20/2025. Of course, it's not going to pull the date, but let me show you. So let's say we're doing waiting and demerge. So let's say waiting for load. So here we're just going to charge them like $500, just an example. Because here you're not doing mileage or weight, right? It's just a rate. So you're charging them $500. So as you can see right here, it moves over to 500 right away. Okay, so same thing with cancellation and other charges. So we can do same thing. Let me drag this down to put a date. Oops, I'm trying to make it go faster, but I think I'm just causing me more time. So you can do cancellation, you can do other, right? You can do, so I'm just showing you for this one, like only $50 other charges, maybe charge them $600, and you can see it automatically pulls over, and then it'll subtotal this, right? So this is the total here. See, it's 2,121, and then the tax rate is 10%, because remember we put 10% in the invoice tracker as 10% for this customer, right? And then the total tax is going to calculate 10% of this amount. Then you have a grand total of $2,333.10. All right. So that's a neat thing about this. You can add as much information as you need, right? For other, you can just keep adding other because it will just grab the total, right? So let's say, for example, we do another other for this invoice, right? And we'll add in another $100. So it's going to take 700. Over here you can see 700, right? Because that's the total. Only you can see this detail, but your customer will see this detail here. So, and you can do this for any invoice. You can just keep adding information here. And one thing to note, and I put a note up here, that weight and mileage, it can handle up to 6 lines. So the reason why is because you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 lines here, right? So you can add 6 lines of mileage and weight or weight, but if you go above that, it's not going to show up here because it doesn't have any more room to fit, right? So just keep that in mind. Hopefully you don't need to add that much data in for the weight and the mileage. Okay, all right, so that's pretty much how it works. You finish adding the detail here, then you can come here and then you can generate your invoice based on the invoice number and automatically populate. And on this invoice here, you should not be changing anything because it should pull the data automatically. But if you need to change anything on the terms and condition, you can go ahead and change it here because this is unique to your business. Okay, so you can come here and change anything you want on these 3 lines, but the rest, please leave it alone because they have formulas that pull the data in. All right, so one more thing I want to show you is on the invoice detail. You can see here, right, you can, as you put in more invoice data, you can come here and select any of the invoice, and then it'll tell you what are the weight that you charge, the mileage that you charge, right, the weighting, the cancellation, and other. And this is the total invoice, right, $2,221, and you can check to make sure that this amount here matches your subtotal here, right? Because this one is showing you before tax, this one is showing you after tax. All right. Okay, so if you're happy with everything here and then this looks, good, what you can do is you can come up here and click on this button to generate the PDF. So what happens is you click on this button here It takes a while for the script to run, maybe like a few seconds. It's not like an instantaneous thing. So once it generated, this box will pop up, and then it gives you this option here to click on this to view the PDF. If you want to click on it or you want to preview it, you can. So you click on this, it should pop up, right? So it should show the PDF here. So this is how it looks like, and this is what's going to be sent to your customer. Okay. All right. So if this looks good, then you can fill out this information here. So I'm just going to fill this out real quick. So I'll just put my email, and then I'll just put invoice, and then you can put your message here. I'll just put sample message, but just put you can put anything you want. And you want a copy, you just click on this button, put your email, and you should get it. Okay. But I don't want a copy, so I'm just gonna send it. So I'm gonna send this invoice. You click on send the invoice, and then you should get this message that says the invoice has been sent successfully. And then the customer should get an email, so which I think I did. So if you go to email here, you can see I got an email for the invoice. So you can see here, right? It's an invoice, and then the customer will get the PDF. Right, pretty cool. And then they can print it out as well. And then this is, I just put sample message, but you can put whatever you want, right? So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so that's basically how it works for this invoice. And then when the customer pays you, what you do is you just go find that invoice number, and then just put in the payment date. So let's say they pay you on June. Right, so as soon as you pick the invoice number, the customer name will pop up, and let's say they paid you $2,000. Well, the invoice was I think a little bit more than that, but let's say they pay you $2,000, and then you can check here which one you want. Is it check, cash? So it's a check, and then I'll just say partially paid. Right, you can put any notes, and up here again you can pick from the drop down menu, right? So as you fill in more data, you can see you have more option, but I only have one invoice. So if you pick this one invoice, it's going to tell you what the grand total of the invoice was. This is including the tax, okay? And then this is the payment that we received, and then this is the difference that's still remaining, okay? So is it right? The grand total? Yeah, $244,310, and then the payment's $2,000. Okay. All right. So that's how this would work here. And as you can see, as you input all this data, you can go back to the invoice tracker, and you can see all of this data have been populated, right? So this is the invoice before tax, and this is the tax applied. This is the grand total, right? These two plus this is equal to 2443.10. And then we received $2,000, and there's the remaining balance, and then of course balance due, right? Hasn't been paid off. And you can come here and you can see on the progress bar it's been 82% paid off. And you can put in information here as you want, like partially paid. You can put the date sent and then the due date if you want here for that invoice. So it's a nice way to track all this information here. And then so after you've completed the workflow, you can come here and look at the dashboard. And of course on this dashboard there's not a lot of information here because we only have one data. But let me show you. Okay, so here on this dashboard here, this is information for all your customers. So here you can pick the year, any year you want to look at. So we worked on 2025, and then you can pick any month. I think we inputted data for May. So if I put May, let's see, data for May. Oh, the due date is June, so it should have been June. So it's based on due date. So if we look at June, there's one invoice, right? The total invoice, the paid amount, unpaid amount, right? We don't have anything that's overdue because we only have one, and we said that was partially paid. So that's why there's nothing that's showing up here. Here we have one that's partially paid. We just need to change this to the correct year. And you can see here the amount would show up. And the nice thing about this is it shows data up to 10 rows. But if you have more than that, let's say you have 20, right? So you can flip to the next page, right? And then the page after that even, okay? And then here you can select any of your statuses to look. Your overdue should also match your overdue over here, right? So this is blank, so that's correct. All right. And then down here, of course, it just gives you a monthly volume and amount here. It's just a graph. Up here is also a graph. You have a pie chart here. And then here, you can look at information by the customer, right? So here we only put data for one customer. So this customer, we didn't put anything. But here, let's say we did customer company LLC. So this is the latest 10 payments, right? This is the recent payment, and then the recent invoice we've provided to this customer. And here's the customer card. It shows the status is active, and then it's information about the customer. So it's pretty cool. And then this other thing I forgot to mention is on this overdue, again, it shows you 8 lines, but you can keep flipping to the next page if you have more than that. All right. So let me show you on this one here. This one's, I have it mocked up where everything is kind of showing, or I have all the information here, so it's easier to play with the dashboard. All right, so, I set up this, and then I go to the customer, I set that information, then invoice, so I set up all my invoices here, as you can see, right here, right? Okay, and then the invoice detail, I put in all these invoice detail, and then invoice generator. So as you can pick any invoice, right? And it will populate data based on that invoice and based on that customer. Okay. And then the payment tracker, I just input in the payment tracker. As you can see, you can pick any invoice. It'll tell you what the grand total is and then the payment received. And then the invoice dashboard is what I want to show you, right? So here, as you can see, this one here on the overdue, there's only 8 lines here, but there's 11. So it should, if you flip to page 2, you can see 3 more, right? So that's pretty neat. And then here as well, this one only shows 10, but there's 16. So you can flip to the next page, right? And you can see the rest. So that's pretty cool. Again, this dashboard's pretty nice. It just, basically picking the, option that you want. And then you can see, your data. So it's pretty cool. And then here, you can come here and then you can pick any of your data, right? Some of this I didn't fill out that much, this company here, I guess I filled out a little bit. And then you can tell you the status and whatnot, right there. Yeah, so that's basically how this invoice tracker works. It's very intuitive, and I think it's pretty cool. So this tracker only works in Google Sheet. The reason why is because of this invoice generator here. So it requires you to enable script, and it's very difficult to create this kind of script in Excel because Excel works with Outlook, and not a lot of people have Outlook. But more people have, I would say, Gmail. So that's why I created this in Google Sheet. So hopefully, if you buy this, it could be helpful to you. And if you think this is helpful, please check it out. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. Thank you.